Welcome back, everyone. Come learn how to install Vault Professional in a new environment after installing SQL. If you missed that initial video, find it on LinkedIn or YouTube and like, follow, and subscribe so you don't miss any more videos in this mini-series. Last time on this series, we installed SQL on a brand new empty server. This time, we're going to go ahead and pick up from that step and install Vault Professional. The first thing you want to do is download and extract the installation media. So to do that, you're going to go to your Autodesk Manage account and download the version of Vault that you want to install. In this case, we're going to install Vault Professional 2025. So we make sure that we download the installation media, as well as the updates that are currently available. So in this case, we have 2025.2 available, as well as 2025.2.1. When you install them, you'll want to make sure that you install them in the correct order, which we'll go over in a bit. Once you have it all downloaded, this is what you should see. You'll see Vault Professional 2025, and in this case, it comes in 3 parts. You don't have to run all 3 parts. When you run one of the 3 parts, it will extract itself into one folder. So in this case, let's go ahead and run it. It'll ask me where I want to extract these files. Depending on the amount of space you have on the server drives, you'll want to make sure that you pick the correct location. To save us some time here, I extracted it previously, so we already have a copy of it. So I'm going to go ahead and cancel out of here. Go to the C drive where I extracted it under Autodesk, and you'll see the same naming convention, VPS. VPS stands for Vault Professional Server. Once we have that, we can go ahead and run the setup.exe. When you run this, you want to make sure that the account you're running it under has administrator privileges on the server so that you don't run into any issues while installing. Once you have the installation running, one of the first things I really like to do, kind of as best practices, is run the pre-checks. So when you install Vault Professional, even if you don't do this step now, it tends to run it when it goes through the actual installation. So I like to get ahead of it. Run the pre-checks here, and it'll tell me if there's anything that needs to be addressed before it goes through the installation. 2 of the most common actions that have to be run typically if it's not ready for installation are a reboot pending. So if your server installed any updates, any Windows updates, anything like that, typically it requires a reboot to go through some changes on the back end of the operating system. So when that happens, Vault wants those to run first before it goes and installs. So it'll tell you whether it needs one of those. The second one I see most commonly is there is an IIS shortcut that is generated. It's an Autodesk DM shortcut. So if that is one of the errors that you get, go ahead and hit your Windows key, and you're going to type in IIS, and you should get the Information Services Manager available on the server. Once you click in there, the best way to get around that action that's required during the pre-checks is by expanding your server name, expanding your site's default website as well. And you'll see here, I don't have that shortcut available, but if you're getting that action item for the pre-checks, you'll have it. You'll make sure you right click on it and remove it. It is just a shortcut, so it's not you're not really changing any configuration of IIS. But once you run your pre-checks again, you should see successful pre-checks 14. So that's what you want to see before you go into installation. Go ahead and hit continue, and then we can start the actual installation process. Once you've gone through the pre-checks and your server is ready for the installation, we're going to go ahead and click install. We're going to go ahead and read this whole license and services agreement that we always do, and then hit accept and hit next. There are a couple of options and configurations you can do on this page. It may not seem like a lot, but you have an option here to expand, to open and configure. If you installed SQL previously, it should already recognize that as a local database, so it'll tell me that Autodesk Vault already exists, so it will go ahead and use that. But then there are a couple of other settings we can go ahead and change. One of them here is the SA account. If you recall or were part of that SQL installation video, you'll know that there's an account that we created called SA, SQL admin, and we set a password for it. When you go through the installation, there is a default password you can set that Autodesk Vault expects. But if you use your own password, this is the location where you would go in and set the password that you actually configured. In our case, we use a default password, so we don't have to change this. The second setting that is mostly configured or changed is the default Windows username and password. This Autodesk Vault account is a local server account that gets generated when you do the installation. Now this account gets, again, a default password that Autodesk Vault expects, but you can go ahead and configure the password that you want it to use. This may be configured or changed in cases where your IT has policies that are required for password complexity. In those cases, you can go ahead and give it a password that matches those requirements. And when it goes and installs Vault Server, it'll already have the new password requirements and password that you set. So this is where you would go ahead and change those. In our case, again, we have everything pretty much set as default. And I'm going to go ahead and close this product list menu. A good check when you're doing the installation and you make changes to those settings is when you close that window, it actually goes and checks those two passwords. If it has any issues with those passwords, it'll tell you at the time of closing, and it'll tell you which password it has issues with. The last thing you can configure here is the location that you're going to install Vault Professional. By default, again, I'm installing it on the C drive. So I'm going to go ahead and just leave it as is. Again, if there are other requirements that your IT infrastructure requires or needs you to install it on, this is where you would go ahead and pick and choose that location. Once you're happy with your settings, go ahead and hit install. And we're going to go ahead and get Vault Professional installed. But before that, it again notices that I have Autodesk Vault, the Autodesk Vault SQL instance installed. So it'll tell me there's a database here. Do you want to use that one? Because we did this already and we did it on purpose, we're going to go ahead and hit yes. Otherwise, it's a pretty good check to see, has anyone else configured SQL on here without your prior knowledge, and it'll allow you to go back and investigate that. But in our case, it's all intentional. We're going to go ahead and continue and go through this installation process. Like I mentioned earlier, if you don't do the pre-checks at the beginning, it goes through and actually does the pre-checks here as well. So you'll find those issues sooner or later. It's just I like to do it sooner. So we're gonna go ahead and let this run and then come back once it's done. Green check marks are always good at the end of an installation. So we'll see here Vault Professional installed correctly. So let's go ahead and close out of this window. There is an option to launch now, but we don't want to launch it yet. What we want to do is install the updates first and then launch it for the first time. It saves us a little bit of time here on the migration side of things. So we're going to close out of here. It'll ask us if we want to run it now or run later. Let's go ahead and run it later and hit OK. Now let's go back to our downloads and we'll see the two updates that we downloaded for Vault Professional. So 2025.2 and 2025.2.1. As a general rule, you want to install the large updates first. So in this case, the .2 update, and then the smaller update or the update to the update, if you will, after the large update has been installed. So we want to run 2025.2 first. and this will go through and install itself on the server. And again, we have a successful installation. We're going to go ahead and close out of here and then run 2025.2.1. Now, I mentioned earlier, it's a general rule of thumb to install the larger update first, but Autodesk does prevent you from installing them in the wrong order. So if you do run 2025.2.1 before running .2, it'll actually tell you that the expected update hasn't been installed, so it won't let you go further. All right, 3 for 3 today. We have 3 successful installations. We have our Vault installed and updated to 2025.2.1. So let's go ahead and close out of here, minimize this, and let's go ahead and run our Autodesk Data Management Server Console 2025 for the first time. When we run it for the first time, it'll ask us to sign in. The administrator password is going to be blank by default. So that's one of the first things we'll go ahead and do here is actually change that password from blank to something a little bit more secure. The other thing it'll ask us to do is whether or not we want to create a brand new vault. In this case, we're not restoring a vault from a previous environment, we're creating a brand new one. If you are restoring from another server or another environment, you can go ahead and hit no here and then go through the restore process through the data management server console. In our case, we're going to go ahead and create a brand new one. So let's go ahead and hit yes. It'll go through the process of creating some databases in our SQL instance and then give us the ability to create our vault. Again, here's that login that we mentioned. The password will be empty. If you are restoring a vault from a different environment, the password will be whatever the password was set to in the previous vault environment. In our case, again, we have administrator with a blank password. So if we hit OK, it logs in correctly, and then it automatically gives us the option to create our brand new vault. So let's go ahead and create a vault here. A lot of our customers aren't, I would say, very creative with their vault names. So a lot of the times, or myself included, we'll use vault as the name. A lot of the times our customers do use personalized vault names as well though. So they'll use the company name _vault space vault. It's really personal preference at that point, but we're going to go ahead and keep it simple here. We're going to go with a regular vault. The next option you have here is selecting the file store location. So with Vault, you have SQL, which is the database. It has metadata, it has information about your files. But those files still exist up in the server, up in your environment. So we need to tell Vault, where do you want to store those files? Typically, you want to store them in a drive or a data location that has enough space for them. So by default, Vault wants to select the location that it was installed on, so in this case the C drive, and then put them in program data. That may not be the case for everyone, so what you can do is select the file store location and then navigate to that location, right? So when we expand our PC, you'll see that I have multiple drives on here, one of them actually named data. So we're going to go ahead and select data here. Make sure that we have a folder that we can use for the file store, and then just hit OK. So now that we selected the location that our files will be stored, we can be a little bit more sure and secure about how those files are being stored and managed on our server. The final option you have here is selecting a configuration. So depending on what you're going to use this vault for, there are certain pre-configured configurations that you can set. If you're going to use one of those, just enable the configuration by clicking on Use Configuration here, and then pick from one of the predefined configurations available. So if you're using it with Inventor and Factory, you can set that up. Construction or building, you can set that up as well. In our case though, we're just going to go ahead and start from scratch and won't be using a configuration. Let's go ahead and hit OK. It'll again go through the process of creating the database in SQL so that it's able to reference it moving forward. For today, we're going to go ahead and see our final successful message for today. And that was that our vault has been successfully created. We're going to go ahead and hit OK. And now, if you wanted to see the settings of your vault, you would go ahead and expand the server, expand vaults, and you'll see the one that you just created. This, of course, means that you can have multiple vaults in the same environment, so on the same server with different names. In our case, we only have one, so that's the one that we're going to use moving forward. All the vaults that we configure can have different locations. So like I mentioned earlier with the file store, we have a drive that we're using for it. So if we wanted to know where those files existed, our file store would always be able to tell us the location of those files. This also helps us keep track of the size of our vault. So the database size here, 322 megabytes to begin with. If you're using SQL Express, like I talked about in our SQL installation video, you'll know that once you get to 10 gigabytes, that is the limit of size for SQL Express, or the free version of SQL. So it's a good thing to keep track of here if you are on Express. That way you'll know when you'll need to start transitioning to standard or enterprise or a paid version of SQL. The other thing you'll be able to see here is the size of the file store. And again, that doesn't have a limit to it per se. The only limit that you have is the size of the drive that you have it on. So if you're starting off with an empty vault, you'll be able to keep track of that a little bit more and know when you need to expand those drives. The last thing we're going to do here is change the password of our administrator. So to do that, what we do is we go to Tools, Administration. Under the Security tab, we go to Manage Access. And you'll see we have no other users other than administrator and guest here. So we're going to go ahead and right click on administrator, hit edit, go under accounts, and select our vault account. So under here, you'll see that we have the username administrator, and then we can go ahead and pick the password that we want. So we're going to go ahead and make it as secure as we need it to be. Once you hit OK, it'll go ahead and double check to make sure that it's the same password you typed in twice, and then hit OK again. And now our password should be set. One thing you'll notice here is in 2025, you'll be able to enforce a password policy. So if there is a complexity that you want to set for your users and the passwords that they use, you can go ahead and enforce that for the users. I'm gonna go ahead and hit close here. And because that password changed, it wants me to sign in again. I'm gonna go ahead and type in our password and hit OK. And because we know the password, we're able to get back in. Thanks for following along with our Mastering Autodesk Vault Setup and Optimization series. Make sure you're liked and subscribed to our LinkedIn and YouTube channels so you never miss an update. Next, we'll be setting up Vault backups so that we can make sure that all the work that you've done so far is safe and we can recover it if necessary.